a big road bridge across the Menai. That surely can't happen, can it? Under what circumstances can you see that happening?
Well, certainly the Roads Review panel looked at it.
And came out against.
And came out against, under the terms we've set. Now, what they're doing though, Nick, okay, is they're not making new policy here. They've been applying our current policy on transport, on planning, on net zero to our pipeline of schemes. Because all of these schemes were first come up with 6, 7, 10 years ago when we didn't have a climate emergency, we didn't have the current planning policy, but nonetheless, they trundle through the system, and before you know it, you're building stuff contrary to your own policy. So all they've done is apply our own policies to our current basket of schemes, and in that case, they've said it doesn't meet the test. Now, we want to be pragmatic about this, okay? Within a very principled framework, but we need to find a pragmatic way through. So we're not going to be dogmatic about it. The Burns Commission is looking at the whole North Wales corridor for transport across the piece. The Roads Review looked at Menai as an isolated scheme. So what I've said to Lord Burns is, can you look at this within the context of the whole of North Wales, or the through traffic as well, and just check that this is the right call?
Resilience is talked about.
It is.
And after everything that's happened over the past 2 months, with the suspension bridge being closed for these long-standing kind of structural repairs that are being carried out, I guess the key question to you is, if there is an opportunity or one occasion where resilience trumps environmental issues, could this be it?
But again, Nick, resilience. Okay, we're talking about short-term resilience there. We need long-term resilience as well.
Well, people on the island would need another crossing then.
Well, but long-term resilience is set against our carbon targets. So within 50 years, Wales is going to be seeing 2-metre sea level rises. You think of where our economic activities around Wales and our houses, it's all along the coast. It's not as straightforward as, let's solve today's problem. We've got to think about tomorrow's problem as well.
It seems very unlikely we're going to get a third crossing there, and then with everything you've just said there, surely.
Well, we can't set aside what the Roads Review panel have said about Menai, but we need to give it a check in a broader context. Let's see what they come up with.
Let's talk about some of the reaction you've had, particularly from within Welsh Labour ranks. A former Transport Minister, Ken Skate, someone you would have worked very closely with. This must surely hurt when you hear the accusation that you have not consulted with people locally. This is not how devolved politics is supposed to work, surely.
Well, it's not personal for a start. Ken and I work together very well. We've always seen transport in different terms. You know, when I was a backbencher and he was trying to get the M4 built, I made his life hell. So I think it's only fair he gives me a bit of stick back. So it's absolutely not personal. He and I see it in a different way. But this is a policy that has been agreed by an independent panel of international experts, by the Cabinet. It is now the government policy. But I completely understand there'll be people who see it differently.
And is the truth of it actually, this can't be made at a local level? Because, I mean, if this decision was made at a local level, the road would be built, wouldn't it, in Wrexham or Flintshire?
We are a nation, and we need a national policy. We are having regional transport plans as part of these new corporate joint committees, the new regional framework for local government. And so each region will deliver its own transport priorities, but they'll do it within a national policy framework. That's how it should be.
Let's talk about public transport. Obviously, this is what everyone talks about in terms of the alternative. I know you'll talk about the major investments in the metro and all the rest of it. Key question, I think, is timing here, isn't it? At what point does you or your successor minister actually can, because you've been very open this week in saying, look, it's not good enough public transport. When is there a moment in which actually you say, do you know what, it is good enough? Do we ever get to that point? Is it 5 years? You know, you talk about that medium term.
The timing is terrible. Okay, so let's just be clear about that on the politics of it, because we are facing the end of the emergency bus scheme, where we're going to have a real threat to the number of bus services because of austerity and still the impact of COVID. We're facing increasing rail fares, and so the public transport picture is not a terribly rosy one. Now, what I'd hoped, and we've done a lot of work over the last year, so that I could have announced before this a cut to bus fares. What we wanted is a £1 flat bus fare for everyone. It would cost 90 million, all our modelling suggests. Before the Liz Truss budget, which blew the economy up, there was a sporting chance we could have done that, and that would have made this week's announcement easier to sell to people. We've not been able to do that, which is really difficult in the short term. But this roads policy remains right for the longer term, because the schemes we're talking about are not schemes happening now. These are schemes happening 5 years hence.
I mean, you've raised it. You really should have had a policy like that in place this week.
I've just told you we were trying.
But I mean, you've got a £20 billion budget. Well, the trouble with this week is, It's all stick. There's no carrot.
Well,
Is there? With respect, Minister, you've got to take people with you.
That's not a fair description at all. Because you're not saying
there's no real alternative in place.
Well, there is an alternative for lots of people. Not every journey, but certainly in urban areas. There is a viable public transport system. There is active travel for short journeys. Over 60% of all car journeys are under 5 miles. So for lots of people, there is an alternative. We have got out of the habit of using it. But we do need to improve the public transport offer. And part of the reason for doing this is to create the headroom in future years to shift funding from building new roads to maintaining the ones we already have, because there's £1 billion road maintenance backlog, and putting money into a quality public transport offer. And we are investing now. We've got £800 million worth of new trains arriving week by week. We've used to be having the runt of the litter on the railway in Wales. Now we're having brand new trains made in Wales that'll be a lovely experience to go on. But we're talking about making medium to long-term changes here to future-proof Wales.
I get that. Final question. Some brutal messaging this week. It's hard, isn't it? You said it's hard. So this is the politics.
The alternative is harder.
Well, it's the politics of pain as well, isn't it? And I just wonder how far you and the Welsh Government is prepared to go. There could be political costs to this. North East Wales, these are areas that are not core Labour in the way they once were. Are you prepared? Is it more important than that? And how does this go down with your Labour colleagues? We've got to fight those seats.
Well, it depends on your view of being in politics, Nick, isn't it? Is it about chasing every opinion poll or every headline? Or is it saying we need to do the right thing based on evidence for the long term? And in truth, there's an interplay between these things. You have to try and find a compromise. But for decades now, we've been talking in Wales about having a duty of sustainability. We celebrated it in the first Government of Wales Act. We're now celebrating the fact we've got the Future Generations Act, and we parade around the world telling everybody how wonderful it is. It's meaningless unless we're prepared to make different decisions in the here and now. And it's uncomfortable, but the alternative is worse, and we'll be judged very harshly by our children if we don't follow through on these decisions.
Lee Waters, thanks very much.